What happens when a world champion fighter underestimates a martial art he calls dancing, only to wake up on the canvas wondering what century he's in? You know, we live in a world where confidence can be your greatest strength or your most humiliating weakness. In today's story, it's about the razor-thin line between those two realities. Welcome back to Tales of Wonder. If you enjoy stories that remind us why humility matters more than any trophy ever could, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a tale that'll make you think twice. Now let's begin today's story. The gym smelled like sweat, rubber mats, and expensive ego. Marcus, the Mauler Davidson, stood in the center of the octagon-shaped training ring at Elite Combat Sports in downtown Los Angeles, his sculpted 6'3" frame glistening under the fluorescent lights. At 32 years old, he was at the absolute peak of his career. The reigning UFC light heavyweight champion with a record of 28 wins, 1 loss, and that single loss had been overturned due to his opponent's failed drug test. In the eyes of the mixed martial arts world, Marcus was untouchable, unbeatable, a living, breathing highlight reel of knockout power and technical precision. His Instagram boasted 4 million followers. His sponsorship deals with sports drinks, athletic wear, and luxury watches added another 7 figures to his already impressive fight purses. He'd been on Joe Rogan's podcast 3 times. He'd dated a Victoria's Secret model. He'd bought his mother a house in Calabasas and his father a vintage Corvette. By every measurable standard, Marcus Davidson had made it. And he knew it. Yo, check this out. Marcus called to his training partners, holding up his phone with a smirk that could only be described as weaponized condescension. On his screen played a video of an elderly Chinese man demonstrating Wing Chun forms in what appeared to be a modest community center. The man moved with deliberate slowness, his hands tracing invisible patterns in the air, his stance narrow and upright in that distinctive Wing Chun posture. This dude's out here looking like he's conducting an invisible orchestra. Marcus laughed, his voice echoing off the gym walls. Wing Chun. That's that man movie stuff, right? The thing that supposedly trained Bruce Lee before he realized it was useless and had to invent his own style. His sparring partners, a rotating crew of hungry up-and-comers who paid for the privilege of being punching bags for the champ, chuckled obligingly. They knew better than to contradict Marcus when he was on a roll. "I'm serious, bro." Marcus continued, warming to his theme. These traditional martial arts guys are living in a fantasy world. You know how many Wing Chun masters I destroy in under 30 seconds? All of them. Every single one. That wooden dummy they punch? That's the only opponent that won't expose how garbage their art is. One of his coaches, a weathered former fighter named Pete who'd seen too many cocky champions fall from grace, shifted uncomfortably by the corner post. You know, Marcus, some of those traditional arts have practical applications if you what, Pete? If you pretend we're still in the 1800s and nobody's invented wrestling. Marcus cut him off with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his arrogance. Nah, man. MMA proved what works and what doesn't. And that cute little center line theory with the sticky hands? That gets you murdered against anyone with a halfway decent overhand right. He tossed his phone onto the bench and rolled his shoulders, shadowboxing with the loose confidence of a man who'd never questioned his place at the top of the food chain. I'd pay money to see one of these masters step into a real fight. Just once. So, everyone could stop with the mystical kung fu master nonsense. What Marcus didn't know, couldn't have known in that moment of supreme self-satisfaction, was that the universe has a peculiar sense of humor when it comes to hubris. And sometimes it delivers with laser-guided precision. 3 days later, Marcus received an Instagram DM that would change everything. The message came from an account called at Wing Chun LA, which had maybe 300 followers and featured photos of students practicing forms in a small school that looked like it operated out of a converted garage. The profile picture showed an older Asian man with graying hair, maybe in his early 60s, with a face that conveyed neither anger nor amusement, just calm presence. The message was simple. "Mr. Davidson, I saw your comments about Wing Chun. I understand your perspective. MMA has proven many things about practical combat. However, I believe there are aspects of traditional arts you may not have experienced. If you're open to learning rather than just dismissing, I'd be honored to share some perspective. No cameras, no media, just martial artist to martial artist. My school is in Monterey Park. The invitation stands whenever you're curious enough to see beyond the stereotype. Sifu Raymond Chen. Marcus read it twice, then showed it to his manager, Tony, who was in the middle of negotiating his next title defense. Some old dude wants to teach me about Wing Chun, Marcus said with a laugh. Should I tell him I'm good? Or should I go there and film me exposing his whole style? Tony, a sharp-dressed man whose moral compass had been replaced by a profit and loss statement years ago, saw dollar signs. Film it. Absolutely film it. The YouTube algorithm loves this stuff. UFC champ destroys traditional martial arts master. Easy million views. We can monetize it, boost your profile before the next fight. Hell, we might even get a Netflix documentary out of calling out frauds in martial arts. Marcus grinned. This was perfect. Not only would he get to prove his point, but he'd get content out of it. His social media team could cut it into clips, memes, reaction videos. The engagement would be insane. He typed out a response. Sure, Sifu. I'm always open to learning. How about this Saturday? I'll bring a cameraman. Nothing personal. Just think people should see what real versus theoretical looks like. See you then. The response came within minutes. Saturday works. 2 p.m. No cameraman necessary. My students can record if you'd like documentation. The address is below. Come with an open mind, Marcus. That's all I ask. Marcus showed the exchange to his team, and they all laughed at the old man's naivete. An open mind? Marcus's mind was open to one truth. Modern fighting techniques had evolved beyond antiquated systems, and no amount of tradition could change physics, leverage, or the brutal reality of a trained athlete's power. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Monterey Park was a 40-minute drive from Marcus's condo in West Hollywood, and he spent most of it on a Zoom call with a sports drink company discussing his latest endorsement campaign. When he finally pulled up to the address Sifu Chun had provided, he almost laughed out loud. The Wing Chun school occupied a narrow storefront squeeze between a bubble tea shop and a Chinese herbal medicine clinic. The sign above the door read, Chun Wing Chun Academy, in both English and Chinese characters. And through the window, Marcus could see a modest space with wooden floors, a few training dummies, and walls decorated with faded photos of old masters and calligraphy scrolls. This is it, said Jake, Marcus's videographer and social media manager, who'd come along for the content. Dude, this is perfect. The contrast between this humble old-school place and your championship aura? Chef Iskis. The algorithm's gonna eat this up. They walked in, the door chiming softly. The space was larger than it appeared from outside, maybe 1,500 square feet, with high ceilings and excellent natural light from skylights. A dozen students, ranging from teenagers to middle-aged adults of various ethnicities, practiced forms in synchronized rows. Their movements were precise but unhurried, each person focused entirely on their own development rather than on the two newcomers. At the front of the class stood Sifu Raymond Chen. He was smaller than Marcus expected, maybe 5'8" and perhaps 150 pounds, with a lean build that spoke of efficient strength rather than gym-sculpted muscle. He wore a simple black kung fu uniform, his graying hair cut short, his posture perfectly upright without seeming rigid. When he turned to face Marcus, his eyes held no challenge, no defensiveness, just quiet observation. Marcus, he said, his accent slight but present. Thank you for coming. Please, feel free to observe for a few minutes while we finish this drill. Then we can talk. Marcus had expected defensiveness, maybe some pontificating about tradition and respect. Instead, Sifu Chan simply returned his attention to his students, offering quiet corrections in Cantonese and English, adjusting a student's elbow here, repositioning someone's stance there. Jake was already filming on his phone, capturing B-roll. Marcus watched the class with barely concealed amusement. The students moved through their forms like Tai Chi in slow motion, shifting weight, extending hands, turning at the waist with that characteristic Wing Chun economy of motion. To Marcus, it looked utterly useless. Where was the power generation? The explosive movement? The realistic simulation of actual combat? After about 10 minutes, Sifu Chun clapped his hands twice, and the class came to a stop. Students bowed, grabbed water bottles, and several immediately pulled out phones to check messages. A reminder that even traditional martial arts schools existed in the modern world. "We can talk in my office," Sifu Chun said, gesturing toward a small room at the back. "Unless you prefer to speak here." "Here's fine," Marcus said, wanting everything on camera. "Look, Sifu, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm going to be straight with you. I don't think Wing Chun works in real fighting. I've seen MMA fighters from every background: boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but never Wing Chun. There's a reason for that, don't you think?" Sifu Chun nodded thoughtfully, showing no offense. "You're correct that Wing Chun is rare in MMA. There are several reasons, some practical, some cultural, some related to how the art has been taught. But the absence of something in one context doesn't prove its complete ineffectiveness. A scalpel isn't used in construction, but that doesn't make it useless." Marcus smirked. "Okay, but fighting is fighting. If Wing Chun had something valuable, wouldn't someone have used it successfully by now?" "Perhaps," Sifu Chun said. "Or perhaps the art has been misunderstood and misrepresented, taught incompletely, or applied incorrectly." Bruce Lee himself didn't abandon Wing Chun. He evolved from it, incorporated its principles into his philosophy. The directness, the economy of motion, the centerline theory, these informed everything he later developed. "Right, and then he learned actual effective techniques from other styles," Marcus countered. "Look, I'm not trying to disrespect you personally. I just think people watching YouTube videos of Ip Man think this stuff works like magic, and it gives them false confidence. I'm trying to help people by showing the truth." Sifu Chun studied Marcus for a long moment, and something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but perhaps a decision being made. "Would you be willing to feel something?" Sifu Chun asked. "Not a fight, just an experience. I'd like to show you one principle of Wing Chun, and you can judge for yourself whether there's anything to it." Marcus glanced at Jake, who gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. This was exactly the content they wanted. The old master trying to demonstrate his ancient technique on a professional fighter, followed by Marcus easily defending and explaining why it didn't work. "Sure," Marcus said, stepping onto the training floor. "What do you want me to do?" "Just stand naturally," Sifu Chun said, positioning himself about 3 feet away from Marcus. "You're much larger than me, much stronger. If I wanted to strike you, what would you do?" "I'd see it coming and either block it, dodge it, or counter with something that would put you on your back," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Most likely," Sifu Chun agreed. "But may I try something? I'll move very slowly at first so you can see the mechanics. Then, if you're willing, I'll demonstrate at functional speed. You're free to defend however you'd like." Marcus spread his hands. "Go for it." Sifu Chun shifted into his Wing Chun stance, feet close together, knees slightly bent, body facing almost sideways to Marcus. His hands came up in that characteristic position, one extended forward at about chest height, the other held closer to his body. To Marcus, it looked ridiculously impractical. Narrow stance, no power base, hands in positions that offered neither good guard nor effective striking leverage. In Wing Chun, we have a principle called Siyuan Jing in Cantonese, Sifu Chun explained calmly. You might know it as the 1-inch punch that Bruce Lee demonstrated. But it's not about the punch itself. It's about whole body power generation through structure and release. The principle is that maximum force doesn't require maximum distance. It requires proper alignment of every joint, transfer of force from the ground up, and release at precisely the right moment. Marcus had seen the famous Bruce Lee demonstrations. He'd always assumed they were partially staged or used compliant partners. "Here, I'll show you the structure slowly," Sifu Chun said, and began moving his arm toward Marcus's chest at glacial speed. Marcus could see everything, how the older man's back foot pressed into the ground, how that energy traveled through his leg, into his hips, up through his spine and shoulder, finally releasing through his arm. The movement was unified, everything arriving at the same microsecond. But it was slow. Theatrical. Harmless. Okay, I see the theory, Marcus said. But in real time, I'd see that coming from a mile away. You would, Sifu Chun agreed. Which is why it's never used from that range in actual application. The principle is employed during bridging, when arms are already in contact, when distance has already been closed, when your opponent's attention is divided. May I demonstrate at realistic speed? Just once. If you can easily defend it, I'll concede your point entirely. Marcus almost laughed. This 60-something-year-old man, giving up probably 70 pounds in 20 years to a professional champion, wanted to try to hit him at realistic speed. Sure, Marcus said, widening his stance slightly into a more athletic position. But just so you know, my chin's taken shots from killers. I don't think. He never finished the sentence. One moment, Sifu Chun was standing in that narrow, seemingly powerless Wing Chun stance, his extended hand about 18 inches from Marcus's chest. The next moment, without any visible wind-up, telegraph, or dramatic movement, that hand traversed the distance in a blur and connected with the center of Marcus's chest. The sensation was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced in fighting. It wasn't the blunt force trauma of a boxing punch or the sharp impact of a kick. It felt like someone had detonated a small explosive inside his ribcage. The force traveled through him rather than just impacting him. Through his sternum, into his chest cavity, disrupting his diaphragm and rattling his internal organs with a concussive wave that seemed to scramble his nervous system. His legs stopped working. Marcus Davidson, the UFC light heavyweight champion of the world, a man who'd withstood hellacious punishment from world-class strikers, felt his knees buckle as his body decided independently of his mind that standing was no longer an option. He sat down hard on the training mat, his vision swimming, his breath completely gone, his mind desperately trying to process what had just happened. There was no pain exactly, just a complete systemic disruption that left him gasping like a fish on dry land. Sifu Chun was immediately kneeling beside him. Breathe slowly, in through your nose. The diaphragm was shocked, but not damaged. You'll be fine in 30 seconds. Several students had rushed over, offering water, concern evident on their faces. Jake had stopped filming, lowering his phone with an expression of complete disbelief. Marcus's breath returned in ragged gasps. The strength came back to his limbs. The fog in his brain cleared. But the shock, the absolute shock of what had just happened, remained crystalline. He looked up at Sifu Chun, who'd stepped back to give him space. And for the first time in years, Marcus Davidson felt something he'd almost forgotten existed: humility. What the hell was that? Marcus managed to say. Proper structure, timing, and release, Sifu Chun said simply. The same principle exists in your own training. Actually, you use it when you throw certain punches, though you generate power differently through different mechanics. Every martial art that works has discovered similar truths through different paths. Wing Chun's approach is simply one interpretation of universal principles. Marcus got to his feet slowly, checking his body for damage and finding none. He felt fine, perfectly fine, which somehow made it worse. He'd been completely neutralized by something that left no visible mark, no lasting damage, just undeniable effectiveness. How? Marcus asked, and the question contained genuine curiosity rather than challenge. I've trained with world champions. I've been hit by everything. That felt like nothing I've ever experienced. Because you've trained primarily against people using the same mechanical approaches as you, Sifu Chen explained. Similar angles, similar force generation, similar tactics. Your nervous system has adapted to recognize and handle those patterns. Wing Chun generates power through different biomechanics. We sacrifice range and certain types of force for concentration and penetration. In the right circumstances, against the right target, it can be devastatingly effective. In other circumstances, it's the wrong tool entirely. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his ego and his intellect engaged in a furious internal battle. Everything he believed about martial arts, about evolution of combat sports, about the supremacy of modern training over traditional arts, It was all being challenged by the simple fact that he'd been put on his ass without even seeing it coming. Could you teach me that? The words came out before Marcus even realized he was thinking them. Sifu Chun smiled for the first time, a genuine, warm expression. The principle? Yes. How to apply it effectively. That would take longer than you probably have time for. But I could show you the mechanics, help you understand how it works. Whether you could incorporate it into your own style is a different question. Your body has been trained in different patterns for years. Relearning movement from a different paradigm is extremely difficult. I want to try, Marcus said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Not because I want to become a Wing Chun fighter, but because I clearly don't know everything I thought I did. Over the next 2 hours, Sifu Chun broke down the principle of Siyuan Jing with the patience of a master teacher and the precision of an engineer. He showed Marcus how every joint in the kinetic chain needed specific alignment, how the smallest rotation of the hips at exactly the right millisecond could multiply force exponentially, how relaxation until the moment of contact was more important than muscular tension. Marcus tried the technique dozens of times against the wooden dummy, against pads, against Sifu Chun himself, who easily redirected or absorbed every attempt. Each time, he could feel the difference between doing the movements and understanding the movements. It was like the difference between playing the notes of a piano piece and actually playing music. Jake filmed some of it, but the tone had completely changed. This wasn't content about exposing fraud. This was documentation of a champion being humbled and choosing to learn from it. As the afternoon sun began slanting through the skylights, casting long shadows across the training floor, Marcus sat on a bench with a towel around his neck. His expensive athletic were soaked with sweat. I came here to embarrass you, Marcus admitted, to film content about how traditional martial arts are outdated. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry. Sifu Chan sat beside him, barely winded despite the hours of teaching. You weren't entirely wrong. Much of what's taught as traditional martial arts is outdated or taught incompletely by people who don't understand practical application. The commercialization and mystification of these arts have done tremendous damage. Your skepticism was earned by countless frauds and fantasists. But you're not one of them, Marcus said. I try not to be, Sifu Chen replied. I learned from my Sifu, who learned from his Sifu, in an unbroken line back to Ip Man himself. But more importantly, I've spent 40 years of pressure testing these principles, adapting what works, discarding what doesn't, and being honest about limitations. Wing Chun isn't magic. It's simply a different approach to solving the same problems every fighting system addresses: how to defend yourself efficiently and effectively. Marcus nodded slowly, his worldview fundamentally reorganized. Can I ask you something? Why did you agree to this? You had to know I was coming here to make you look bad. Sifu Chan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I've watched you fight, Marcus. You're extraordinarily talented. Your dedication to your craft is obvious. But you've developed a blindness that many champions develop. The belief that your way is the only way, that your success proves the inferiority of everything you've never tried. That blindness will hurt you eventually, either in the cage or in life. I thought perhaps one experience of being wrong might open a small door in your mind. A door through which humility and continued growth could enter. The words hit Marcus harder than the Siyuan Jing had. You're right, Marcus said quietly. I've been an arrogant asshole. Not just about martial arts, about everything. Success made me think I had all the answers. Success often does that, Sifu Chen said. It's one of its greatest dangers. The antidote is simple. Remain curious. Remain humble. Remain a student, even when you're also a master. Especially then. Marcus didn't post the video. Instead, he posted a different video the following Tuesday, one that Jake had filmed with Marcus speaking directly to camera in his home gym. No dramatic editing, no clickbait thumbnail. I want to talk about something that happened to me this weekend. Marcus began, his tone serious and reflective. I went to challenge a traditional martial arts master, fully planning to expose his style as ineffective. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. And I want to talk about why being wrong was one of the best things that's happened to me in years. He recounted the experience, not in a way that humiliated himself, but with genuine thoughtfulness about his assumptions, his arrogance, and what he'd learned. He explained Sifu Chen's principles without pretending he'd mastered them. He acknowledged that different martial arts have different strengths, different applications, and different value depending on context. I'm not saying everyone needs to go learn Wing Chun, Marcus concluded. I'm saying we need to approach things we don't understand with curiosity rather than dismissal. There's a difference between healthy skepticism and arrogant close-mindedness. I crossed that line. Meeting Sifu Raymond Chen pulled me back. So, if you see me fight differently going forward, if you notice different entries or different angles, know that I'm trying to expand my understanding rather than just reinforcing what I already know. That's how you grow. That's how you stay sharp. And that's how you become not just a better fighter, but a better person. The video went viral anyway, but for different reasons than Tony had hoped. It generated 12 million views in the first week, not because people loved watching someone get destroyed, but because they respected vulnerability and growth. Comments flooded in from martial artists of every style, from coaches and teachers, from people who had nothing to do with fighting but recognized the universal truth in Marcus's words. The mainstream media picked it up. UFC champion's humility goes viral. Marcus Davidson shows what real strength looks like, when being wrong makes you right. More importantly, it opened a conversation in the martial arts community about the value of cross-training, about respecting different methodologies, about the danger of style tribalism, and the poverty of believing any one approach had all the answers. Marcus began training with Sifu Chun twice a week, fitting it in between his regular MMA training camps. He didn't abandon his foundation. Wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, and Jiu-Jitsu remained his core, but he added new dimensions, new ways of thinking about distance and timing and structure. His striking became subtly more efficient, his entries less predictable, his understanding of leverage more sophisticated. His next title defense, 3 months later, ended in a second-round TKO when Marcus slipped inside his opponent's jab, using a footwork pattern he'd adapted from Wing Chun principles, then finished with a combination that started with a modified Cun Jing to the solar plexus that cramped his opponent's diaphragm just long enough for Marcus to follow with a devastating uppercut. Joe Rogan mentioned it in the post-fight interview. That body shot was different. Where'd that come from? Marcus smiled. Been training with a Sifu, learning that there's more than one way to solve a problem. After the fight, Marcus found Sifu Chun in the crowd. He bought him front row tickets and bowed, the traditional martial arts gesture of respect from student to teacher. Sifu Chun bowed back, his expression proud in that understated way of teachers who watch their students surpass them. 6 months after that first meeting, Marcus stood in Sifu Chen's school again, but this time in a very different capacity. He'd asked if he could bring someone, a young, up-and-coming fighter from his gym, a 22-year-old hotshot who reminded Marcus painfully of himself a year ago. The kid's name was Devin, and he had all of Marcus's old arrogance with none of the experience to justify it. "So this is the place?" Devin said, looking around the modest school with barely concealed disdain. "This is where you learned your secret moves. This is where I learned to shut up and listen," Marcus replied, which was more valuable than any technique. Sifu Chan emerged from his office, greeting Marcus with warmth and Devin with polite interest. "Sifu, this is Devin," Marcus said. "He's got real talent. He's also got a big mouth and a bigger ego. Sound familiar?" Sifu Chen's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I believe I've met this person before. Would Devin like to feel something?" Devin glanced at Marcus uncertainly, some of his bravado fading as he realized this was set up. "Only if he's willing to learn from it," Marcus said. "Otherwise, it's just a party trick and we're wasting Sifu's time." Devin straightened his shoulders, his competitive pride engaging. Yeah, show me." Marcus stepped back, letting history repeat itself with variations. He knew what was coming. He knew Devin couldn't possibly imagine what was coming. And he knew that being put on your ass by a master was a gift, not a humiliation, if you were wise enough to receive it that way. Sifu Chen assumed his stance. Devin took up a defensive position, his young fighter's reflexes coiled and ready. "This will be 1 inch of movement," Sifu Chun said calmly. "Try to stop it." What happened next was inevitable, predictable, and absolutely necessary. Devin sat down hard on the mat, his eyes wide with shock, his breath gone, his entire understanding of fighting temporarily scrambled. Marcus knelt beside him, offering water, and said with complete sincerity, "Welcome to the first day of actually learning, brother." Because true strength, Marcus had discovered, isn't in never being knocked down. It's in getting up different than you fell. And sometimes the most powerful knockout happens without anyone losing consciousness. It's the knockout of assumptions, of arrogance, of the limiting belief that you've already learned everything you need to know. That knockout, that's the one that actually changes your life. A year after their first meeting, Marcus Davidson retained his UFC title for the 4th time, cementing his legacy as one of the sport's all-time greats. But what people remembered most wasn't his championship run. It was his evolution, both as a fighter and as a human being. He'd become an advocate for cross-training, for intellectual humility in martial arts, for the idea that mastery was a journey rather than a destination. He brought traditional martial artists onto his podcast, giving them platform and respect. He donated to schools like Sifu Chen's, helping preserve traditional knowledge while encouraging honest evaluation of practical application. And every Saturday morning, without exception, Marcus Davidson, UFC champion, millionaire athlete, social media influencer, showed up at Wing Chun Academy in Monterey Park and trained like a white belt, asking questions, making mistakes, and learning. Because he discovered something more valuable than any championship belt: the understanding that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop growing. And growth, he realized, was the whole point. The trophies just marked mile markers along an infinite road. So, here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever been so confident in what you knew that you close yourself off to learning something that could have changed everything? And if you got a second chance, would you take it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and some of your stories are honestly more incredible than anything I could write. If this story hit different for you, if it made you think twice about the difference between confidence and arrogance, do me a favor. Smash that like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale. Because every Tuesday and Friday, we're diving into stories that remind us what really matters in this wild, complicated, beautiful life. See you in the next video, my friends. Stay humble, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in the smallest packages, delivered by the most unexpected teachers.